Last week, the United Nations Human Rights Council passed a resolution to open an investigation into alleged war crimes committed in the final stages of the Sri Lankan Civil War, which ended in 2009. Aligning itself with Venezuela, China, and Iran, Australia chose to oppose the move, saying that any investigation at this time is not the best way forward. Following Australia's controversial decision, human rights groups gathered in a snap protest outside Julie Bishop's office to express their outrage at this decision.
The Australian government, while not a voting member of the committee this time, advised against the independent investigation and claimed, contrary to all reasonable evidence, that there is progress towards human rights and reconciliation in Sri Lanka, whereas everything that we have seen suggests absolutely the opposite.
It's been more than 5 years since the end of war, and there is still no peace for the people in Sri Lanka.
What goes on in Sri Lanka is appalling. Sri Lanka is a police state. Sri Lanka has carried out genocide basically against the Tamil people, and for Julie Bishop to stand up there and tell us it's not happening is an absolute affront to anybody with half an intellect.
Human rights advocates claim that Australia's opposition to the resolution indicates a willingness to ignore human rights violations in order to see their own domestic policies succeed.
Our government colludes with the Rajapaksa regime to be able to justify the refoulement of Tamil asylum seekers and refugees back to a regime that has already punished them, that already persecutes them, that already discriminates against them.
And we think the Australian government policy is motivated not by a desire to satisfy the needs of the people of Sri Lanka, to meet human rights needs, but it derives from their Stop the Boats policy. Their Stop the Boats policy means you have to turn back Sri Lankan asylum seekers. It means you have to deny that Sri Lankan asylum seekers are real refugees. This is the cruel and mad logic of the Stop the Boats policy. It means you have Australia in contradiction with every independent human rights organisation, in contradiction with the UN, in contradiction with vast amounts of testimony claiming that there isn't a human rights problem.
One of the largest populations of people seeking asylum in Australia are Tamils from Sri Lanka, and Australia is implicit in proactively deporting Tamils back to Sri Lanka where they face torture and death by the Sri Lankan government. So I think we are very much implicit in these crimes. 23
of the 47 council nations voted in favour of the resolution. 12 voted no and 12 abstained. In an interview with Sri Lanka's High Commissioner to Australia, Admiral Samarsinghe, he claimed this indicates there is strong opposition on the Council to the vote.
When a country abstains from voting, it's a fact that they don't want to get on board the resolution which they don't accept. When you put the two votes of abstentions and vote against, that vote is defeated. The resolution is absolutely unwarranted, baseless, and unsubstantiated. I'm very grateful and happy that Australia withstood all this pressure and stood for justice in Sri Lanka.
Just because the current Sri Lankan government is building bridges and roads just to show the world that everything is alright. It's not alright. There are still people disappearing. They are still arresting human rights activists in Sri Lanka.
Why are dissident journalists still disappearing? Why haven't Tamil people been repatriated to land that's actually theirs? Why are human rights not being respected? Why won't the Sri Lankan government allow an investigation? If they've got nothing to hide, they should be happy to have an investigation.
One person per week being disappeared in the infamous white vans. A place where over 40 journalists have been killed or disappeared in a decade. So the idea that by cooperating with the Rajapaksa regime that we're making progress to human rights is utter bogus, and Julie Bishop must know it.
If we want a better world, we have to strive for human rights, not just the rights of businesses to make money, and that's what Julie Bishop's all about. The rights of businesses to make money. She doesn't care a fig about human rights.
The investigation is likely to proceed with or without the cooperation of Sri Lanka. The results will hopefully give Australia cause to rethink their refugee policies and their relationship with the Rajapaksa regime. This is Catherine Albright-Peacock reporting for Undercurrent.